Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome to Spirit Speakeasy. I'm Joy Giovanni, Joyful Medium. I'm a working psychic medium, energy healer, and spiritual gifts mentor. This podcast is like a seat at the table in a secret club, but with mediums, mystics, and the spiritual luminaries of our time. So come behind the velvet ropes with me and see inside my world as I chat insider style with profoundly gifted souls. We go deep, share juicy stories, laugh a lot, and it wouldn't be a speakeasy without great insider secrets and tips. You might even learn that you have some gifts of your own. So step inside the Spirit Speakeasy. Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome in to Spirit Speakeasy. Our guests today are Gail and Gregory Haag. If you have ever wondered about sacred geometry, what it actually means, is it some kind of woo-woo magic? It is not. It essentially houses all of the secrets of the universe that we all want to know, including how to live our best lives, how to transform our lives. I had the joy and pleasure of reading Gail and Gregory's book, which is called Sacred Geometry, the Universal Language of Divine Alignment. And they're going to answer so many of my questions. As you guys know, I often am like this waterfall of questions. I have been called to and dabbled in sacred geometry many times over the course of my spiritual journey here, but never to the extent that is explained and expressed in this book. I always felt like I was sort of missing something when I was dabbling with sacred geometry, but the way that Gail and Gregory go into unfolding all of this for us is so incredible and profound, and it makes it so accessible to everyone. So I'm so excited to share this conversation with Gail and Gregory Haag. Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back or welcome in for another episode of Spirit Speakeasy. My guests today, it's our first time having a dynamic duo of guests, Gail and Gregory Haag. With over 4 decades of dedicated expertise in the realm of sacred geometry, Gail and Gregory Haag have pioneered groundbreaking technologies and discoveries that have transformed the lives of tens of thousands across the globe with their teachings and tools. They've harnessed the power of divine archetypes to amplify higher dimensional energies and elevate the human experience, catalyzing personal and spiritual growth. The Haags are well-known speakers and teachers, revealing how the universal patterns displayed in sacred geometry play a foundational role in the evolution of consciousness. We're here today to discover the profound wisdom and innovation that have made Gail and Gregory Haag esteemed leaders in the world of sacred geometry. Through their lifelong dedication, they continue to inspire and guide countless individuals towards the path of higher consciousness, well-being, and profound connection. And today we are so lucky because they're going to be revealing some of their insights and secrets from their acclaimed new bestseller, Sacred Geometry, the Universal Language of Divine Alignment. Welcome in, Gail and Gregory.
Oh, thank you for having us, Joy.
Yeah.
I am so excited to have you. I have to tell you, I loved your book. I can tell that it is a labor of love that you put into it. And really, for anyone that hasn't read it, I'm going to link everything in the show notes, but this is the most expansive, prolific description of sacred geometry that I've ever read, where most works are scratching the surface. You really go so deep in under 300 pages. I don't know how you did it.
It was a lot of work for me.
It was called editing.
A great editor, I'm sure. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine.
And the other thing is realizing that it's a pretty dense book, and there's only so much that people can take in at once.
Yeah.
And we want people to understand it. We want people, not to get overwhelmed out of it. But actually, one of the things I love hearing is when folks will say, in school, I just hated math and science. Geometry was just not my deal. And when I got into your book, I thought, why didn't they teach it that way?
Yeah.
And I think that, that's really an important thing, to create all the connections to what this is about. What's the purpose behind it? How does it really, how does it speak to us and make our lives more understandable and better? So we really worked to put out the information and also show people why it's important, how it really adds value to their lives.
I think that's one of the really special elements of the way that you all wrote the book and perhaps your editors put it together. And for anyone listening, there's pictures, which I found really helpful, diagrams and explanations. So to your point, if you're someone that felt like, oh, I didn't really like math or geometry in school, this is not that type of textbook dry style. It really is it's really delicious in the way I actually was just thinking, like, I'm going to have to read this book again just to really more deeply absorb it. But all of the graphics that you show and all of the like real life relatable examples are just wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And, it's so important. It was important to us that we've been doing this for 40 years, working with the way energy comes through and vibrates with everything around us and follows geometric patterns. So we've been using it, and it was in the use of the tools that we've been building that we started understanding what we were being guided to build and how it related to everything else. It was not just one piece here and another piece there that kind of showed up out of nowhere, but everything is tied together. Everything is related. And I think that's one of the more exciting parts of the book, is that when you start understanding how there's so much perfection being displayed in this entire universe, and we are part of that. We are part of the perfection. We are part of that understanding. And if a plant and a bird and some other rock here can all relate through some dynamic, oh my God, we are also connected to the rock, the bird, and the plant in very dynamic ways. So it's an exciting journey that I hope a lot of people start going into.
I hope so too. And some of the examples that you all give are so profound, but at the same time, pedestrian enough. I would love for you to share the example about the birds with the hurricane. I can't remember even the type. The is it the ospreys or a different type of bird? And it's like, oh yeah, of course that's what they're doing. Yes, the thrush. Thank you. Will you share a little bit about that story just to kind of start to unfold this for us?
Well, this is one of my favorite stories of what animals and plants, everything works together, and it does it so immaculately. We often disregard things and just say, oh, that's instinct, whatever. And yet this little bird called the veery thrush that nests in northern New England and southern Canada, the scientists that were observing the veery thrush noticed that some years they would leave earlier than others, literally abandoning their nesting sites. And so they thought, well, is this due to population or due to food scarcity? Or, they tried all these different parameters. And what they finally discovered was that this little bird winters in South America, and it has to fly over the Gulf of Mexico in that migration. So what would happen is, if a hurricane were to come in earlier, as Beryl did to Texas this year, this little bird was able to time its departure so it would avoid major hurricanes. And it did such an amazing job of discerning when to leave and what the hurricane season was going to be like. It did a much better job than NASA, than all of our weather services together haven't been able to predict hurricanes as well as this little bird. And what that portends for us is that this little bird, all animals, all life, it tunes into what it needs to and is served so completely by universal understanding. And that we as human beings have that same opportunity, but it exists on a higher dimensional level.
Yeah.
And that's what we are opening up to, and what we have been doing with building the tools we've been building for the last 40 years. We've been discovering these higher dimensions, and that's where the information comes from for us to build what we build. And it's there for this bird and for the fish that need it, and so on. And there are so many things in creation that can tune in to the understanding of all that is. And this is what we're growing into. And in channeling and bringing through information from even people that have recently passed, there's some bit of wisdom from that higher perspective. But we can
Absolutely.
go even higher and
Yeah.
higher into an understanding that oversees our lives in such a way that we don't take this character as personally anymore. And we're able to navigate life with a lot more love and joy, and, as Gail likes to say, serendipity, because the magic happens when we're operating from those higher levels.
Which is so incredible. Actually, you led lovely into my next question. In the section of the book where we're talking about this veery thrush, you also really make so clear and beautiful this idea of what is the difference between consciousness and awareness, which is sort of what you're tipping into here. Will you share a little bit about those differences? Because I think it's that I'm always complaining about language, and I think it's a little muddy in the waters, right?
Consciousness is kind of like the big, here, let me get over here a little bit
No,
more. Oh, I'm back here. Oh, I see.
There you go.
Okay, good. So consciousness is the container of everything. When we were putting out the information about sacred geometry, we decided that the first chapter in our book should be about consciousness. What is consciousness? Because consciousness is not separated from creation. Consciousness is embodied in creation. It's the foundation of creation. And in fact, that consciousness is love. And that energy, when we understand universe and how spectacularly it's created, there's an energy that brings it through, because everything starts out as energy. It's frequency, vibration, whatever you want to say, but it's energy. And that energy isn't just some random abstract thing. It's consciousness. It is coherence. It is an intelligence. It's a creation. And that it's the spirit that is so essential in all of that. Now, when we think about awareness is really more attuned to what our brains and our perceptive capabilities in this body lend to us. So our awareness is going to track more on what we can see, hear, touch, feel, those kinds of things, and think.
Yeah.
And consciousness incorporates all of that, but it goes beyond it. It goes into the higher dimensions of who we are and into the essence of creation. And so that consciousness is so important for us to connect to now. And, one of the things that I love about our journey into sacred geometry is that, there's a lot of people that, are walking around feeling very disconnected.
Yes.
And connection is part of who we are. We aren't fully alive without connection.
Yeah.
If we're not connected to soul, then basically our body will die. And when we are connected to soul, that's where we thrive. So all of our work has really been predicated on helping people to not only strengthen, but in some cases even establish that connection at a much higher degree than what they've been able to do up until now. And I believe, and I'm guessing that you're feeling this too, the energies on this planet now they're pretty amazing. There's a lot of shift going on, a lot of metamorphosis and opportunity. And the more that we are connected and understand our grounding into this foundation, the better we are. And I wanted to also share that for me, I really can remember as a little child looking out at the stars at night and wanting to understand where do I belong in all of this? How am I connected? What is my place in this incredible realm? And sacred geometry has been my way of being able to understand that. And it shows us in so many different ways. Sacred geometry isn't just about these beautiful pictures that people have that you can look at.
Yeah.
It's about the rhythms and patterns and cycles and the very essence of creation, which is why it was so important for the ancients. They created their temples, their sacred spaces based on these principles because they wanted to bring something to humanity that would support them in those essential and divine connections.
Well, and that's one of the things I loved so much about the book is not only do you give a lot of real world examples that we've either heard of through history or with different, you talk about the Greeks with the 108 pillars and, but also you really break it down to the 1 through 9 numerology of it all, how that fits in and what that means in relation to these various geometric shapes that are so sacred, but to Gregory's earlier point, are so much a part of just our everyday experience that we can easily overlook them. Will you talk a little bit more about how sacred geometry fits into this picture of overall connectedness into this higher consciousness of love?
Well, it's
It's a big question, I know.
it's a huge question.
I know.
It really is.
And read the book because it's in there. But
Yeah.
well, let me
Everything that
ask it
gets
this
down
way.
to it.
What are some examples of sacred geometry that people might recognize just from you give so many in the book. I love the pineapple one because it's like, oh yeah, we see this all
Yeah.
the time. What are some ways that the average bear might have already experienced lots of sacred geometry in the world around them?
Okay. And I also, let me just quickly say, and then I'll get into
Yes, I would love
down
that.
into that. But when we were just talking about consciousness and sacred geometry, it is it's the God spark finding its way into the physical dimension. And
So maybe the
it
expression
has
of
to do that.
consciousness.
Yes, and how it expresses itself is in these absolutely magnificent patterns and rhythms and cycles. And so the patterns that we see are, everywhere around us in flowers and trees and pineapples and turtle shells and our bodies, the cells within our bodies, the way that the molecular structure is predicated. Everything has an order. And so here we are from this perspective. people sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, we're in this crazy random universe.
Yeah.
And yet, when you get to another level of peeking into it, you see essentially how that creative spark is so focused on being able to come in and create physicality. Because here it is, think about energy, raw, pure energy with no shape, no form from these higher dimensions. And then through this, through this dynamic of love is coming into this physical capacity,
Yeah.
and it's creating form, this form that we all are, everything around us, the rocks, the trees, the way the clouds move, everything is within that. And so, we tend to get, we spend more time focusing on our physical world,
Yeah.
even though our physical world, the actual density, is such a minor part of it. And yet that's where we put our attention into. But when we start putting our attention into what the majority of it is, that space, that um, that integrity of everything that is, it is so enormous. And so we are filled in our consciousness, in our bodies, in our hearts, we're filled with that capability to touch into that. And that's what I think is really exciting in sacred geometry. And Gregory's chomping at the bit. I want to say something too here.
We have such a fun time going back and forth.
We're a dynamic duo, like I said.
It is. And, the exciting thing that I wanted to really share in our book is that the universe does follow these patterns, everything from atoms all the way through molecules to galaxies, and that's the way that energy flows through these relational harmonics, so that even in different types of measure, like degrees, years in time, minutes and seconds in time, and miles in distances, like the diameters of the moon, the earth, and the sun, there are harmonic relationships where energy can flow. And that's really what we've been working with in the tools that we build. And that's some of what, well, I guess in this crop picture, you can't see what's next to me, but bottom line, there are geometries that we build and we put independence and work with certain frequencies and materials because we want to create a resonance with the way universe works.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we can bring that energy into our environment, and it shifts the way we think, the way we feel, the way, just as that veery thrush was able to tune in. I mean, we need support in tuning in, and that's what some of the tools that we've built for people help them do. It helps move them into a higher vibrational frequency that allows for a deeper connection to all that is. So you can start to understand how things come together. You can understand how to be in the right place at the right time. You get the ahas about what you should be doing with your body to help it be in better health. You get to be in the right place at the right time to meet the right person, the right thing. All the things that we sometimes struggle with in this lifetime can be much easier in the way we execute them if we're just coming from that place of connection internally. And there are so many things in our environment today. And that's another thing we talked about in the book. We spent a whole chapter saying, well, this is consciousness.
Yeah.
And this is what keeps us from exploring that vast consciousness. It's the things like the electromagnetic frequencies, the toxins in the environment, all the fears and the separation that we feel in the world today, and what's going on with the judgments and the
Yeah.
stress. And that limits our abilities. It confines and pushes us into a small part of our being. Just this little character that sometimes we don't realize we are like an iceberg where we have much more going on other levels that we can't see, but we can feel on a
Yeah.
mental level, we can feel on an emotional level, but those emotions, they exist around us like in the auric field. And some people have the ability to see that. And that's moving to a higher dimensional perspective when they can see the colors in an aura.
Yeah.
But bottom line, if we don't be careful with the amount of negativity that we put in there, with all the worry, all the fear, all the stuff that's making us sad and angry, those fields hang out around us and are so thick it makes it difficult for that love to come through, for that perspective of higher self to come through, for that relationship. We talk about this in the New Age all the time,
So
that we
true.
are all connected, and yet to really feel that connection, to know that you and I are here to be in service to everyone. And
Yeah.
that's what gives us the greatest joy and the greatest support, because we are that full body and we are just playing the part of one aspect of that body. Each of us has our unique parts, and that's what's so magical about being here right now.
You do such a beautiful job in the book of use this analogy of the iceberg, right? I mean, there are many examples and food for thought there. But I think in the new age, like you were saying, a lot of what's out there is talking about how we're a soul having this physical experience. The way I understand it in my work is the greater part of our soul is actually outside of our physical body. And that's some of what you're illustrating in the book, but you really go deep into it. I want to come along to your tools and technologies in just a few minutes, because through the book, what you also share woven throughout is that you both are artists in your own right. And it's some of
Mhm.
how you started playing with this technology and experimenting with it. And I love that you also lean into other people's experiments and discoveries to help advance your own. In the book, we've talked about it here before. It's Dr. Emoto's demonstration through his work with water, how those positive versus negative or challenged emotions can be held in water and can transform it actually. You give a few examples of this, but I think this is a great bridge from what you were just saying, Gregory. How does our collective consciousness instruct what manifests here in our experience?
And something that I also shared when I was talking about Emoto's work, and for people listening who aren't familiar with his work, it's he found that by working with water, people could either use very positive emotions like love and positive affirmation with water, and then he would freeze
Yeah.
the water into ice crystals. And the higher the vibration of the emotion, love, joy, connection, he would find that the snowflakes would be more perfectly formed. And in cases where it was water that was out of the pipes of some city, or it was with people putting negative thoughts into it, fear and anger, he would find that it wouldn't form very good snowflakes at all. And the interesting thing I also thought is that if our consciousness can create a perfect geometry, that perfect geometry goes back the other way and could also inform our consciousness and affect our consciousness. And so that's what we've been doing with our geometries and saying if the perfection of a geometry is a reflection of consciousness, it works both ways, both in the way, he has shown us, Emoto has shown us that our thoughts make a difference. And if we spend time worrying, just like the bad water vibes that you get, that's what your life is like.
Yeah.
And if you instead put a little more time into gratitude, in your morning ritual, thank the universe, thank God, thank creation for your life and everything you've been given, and you put out those positive vibrations, that's what comes back. And we know this in the New Age community and what people are thinking about today. And yet, sacred geometry really brings it into some very concrete forms and showing how geometry is a reflection of this consciousness as well.
I would love for you
And
to say more
yeah,
about that. Go ahead, Gail.
well, geometry is really, it's the structure. It's what came first. And, I always like to keep reminding people, let's go back to the origin. The origin is energy, it's pattern, it's frequency. And if you want to make change, it's easier to make change at that level than it is once it's gone through this whole pathway into the physical. Because the physical is then really representing what has been, what we're tapping into on those higher dimensional levels, on those frequency levels. So just like with the ice crystals, what really shifts the way they look is that the frequency of whether it's joy and love or whether it's fear and sadness are going to be vastly different. And then they show up into the physical realm. But the place that we really want to come back to is we can impact our lives based on understanding and utilizing the principles of universe. I mean, universe is giving us all of this. And so when we're in harmony with the construction of universe and we understand the way energy flows and the movements and all of that, then we can play with that. Just like a musical composition, it's not all going to be just one sound. There's a variation of harmonics, but within that, you can still stay within a band of what creates positive outcomes. So if you go into a concert where actually we were just at a concert the other day and it was like this really loud, banging, metal sounding, really hard on my body kind of energy. That is one place that I kind of don't want to visit again for a while, as opposed to going into a concert where the harmonies are beautiful. The sounds of the voices or the violins or the piano or whatever make my heart feel good rather than the other way, which is like, I need to protect my heart. So we know all this. We feel all this. And if we allow our awareness to help us gravitate towards those things that the universe is offering to us that really support healthy well-being, then we're going to be in really great condition. And just like the veery thrush, when we're in harmony with the universe, we get all these different instructions. Now, the question is, are we going to listen or not? And the veery thrush isn't obstructed by all this other stuff.
Right.
So it tunes in, it listens. And yet, there's a lot, as Gregory was just saying, there's a lot that distracts us. And
Yes.
that's why we've been on our mission for the last 40 years to create tools that are vibrating with these universal patterns so that we can stay in harmony with that positive creative force. And it makes all the world of difference to be in that place.
I think there's such a fine balance to your point. We are trained, particularly in this last phase of time, to focus on the physical manifestation. And New Age and your work teaches us that actually it's these unseen layers of the iceberg, and it starts there. And by the time something's manifesting into the physical world, it's more of a symptom of what's happening than a root cause.
Right.
For me, when I came across Dr. Emoto's work, it's why it was so powerful, because it's this intangible, speaking words of love and those higher vibrational emotions, and you can physically see the tangible result. His work is out there. I'll link it in the show notes for everyone, just because I think it's such a powerful representation of what the book teaches. Now, you have alluded to it a little bit. You all have designed these incredible, they're tools, and I know we call them technology, but they're works of art is the way I see it. Anyone that's going to watch the video version, you'll see this beautiful geometric structure behind the Hoags, and also these pendants that you're wearing are part of this beautiful technology, this artwork. I think it's part of the power of these tools is that it's a physical representation, so we can see it in the 3D world. And I think there's something about it. I know in the book you talk about, I know these two are connected in my mind. You talk about earlier on in your work, many years ago, that you were creating actual large sacred geometric structures and meditating inside of them and having other people meditate inside of them. And then somehow along the journey, it has metamorphosized, I'm sure through the guidance that you've received, being so connected in that, okay, everyone doesn't have to have a giant structure in their home to meditate in. It can be condensed into these wearable pendants, for example. I feel like I have 7 questions between here, but here we are. Will you share a little bit about how that jump happens, or how this inspiration comes in for these technologies, and how they work in real life?
There's a lot of questions there.
I know, and you should
Right.
see the list I have on the side that you can't see.
Okay, well, let's try to cover some of these. I was going to, I think, there.
Oh,
You can
beautiful.
see this is a close-up of some of the pendant that we're wearing. It has 2 sides, because one side moves the energy down and the other side moves the energy up through your body.
Beautiful.
And the patterns that are on it are actually, what we found is that we can take a 3-dimensional form, like here a star tetrahedron, and when you look at it from one perspective, say the point, it looks like a 6-pointed star. You look at it from the side and you have a diamond and triangles.
Yeah.
And then you look at it from another edge and it changes the pattern. So we found that we can take 3-dimensional energy that comes through 3-dimensional forms and put it into a 2-dimensional pattern that we have in the pendants. And so, working with these different geometries, we found, at first I liked to build big things because I wanted to sit inside them. But then, it's nice to have that energy around you and be able to give someone a hug without having something, on your chest that's going to poke them, you know?
For those
And
that are
so,
listening on the audio version, Greg's holding something that's a little bigger than a softball, and it's this
yeah.
star geometric shape. So, yeah, you couldn't necessarily wear a giant softball on your chest around in the world. You
And
could, I
so,
guess, but
part of it is practical. Part of it is, the way spirit worked with us too is it let us discover things. It's just like you or someone as a parent, you don't go up to your child who's coloring and say, hey, let me do it for you, I do a better job. And you let them do their coloring thing, and spirit has let us do our discovery thing.
yeah.
And yet, as we discover a little deeper about the energy, we find that, oh, we could make it smaller, we could make it this way, we could add this element. And it's the newest pendant. We've gone through a number of pendants, but the newest one has a geometry on it that we just had a friend working with us the other day, and this particular geometry is spherical, and it's very soft, it's very feminine in its energy. And that's been part of the shift to the new pendants that we've designed, is working more with the divine feminine, because that's an aspect of creation that we are moving into more and more. And it's something that is coming up in the world, with women's rights and what's going
Yeah.
on with so many things where people's attention is moving in that direction, because it is through the divine feminine that we discover source, that we discover the higher aspects of being. And so that was something that, as we were getting ready to put out the new pendant, Gail said, she heard that we need to bring this aspect into our new pendant. And so that's the way it happens, just step by step, little by little. We've had 40 years of thousands of little steps.
Yeah.
And, one thing leads to another. Science discovers holograms, and then we go, oh, that's the way the universe works too. So it's almost like we discover something in science and then realize that this gives us a window to understanding how universe works. That if you have the whole and you cut a small piece out of a hologram, it still has the whole picture in that small piece.
Mm-hmm.
It may be less defined, but it's still there. And, that's something that Rumi shared hundreds and hundreds of years ago in one of his poems, that you are not the drop in the ocean, you are the ocean in a drop.
Yeah.
And if we start to understand that and embody that, that's what gives us access to all that is, access to the entire ocean. We are not limited to the drop that we think defines our edges. We are much more when we are able to energetically move into that bigger space.
Yeah.
That answered a few of those questions.
I love
Which
it. No,
one
it's
did we miss?
there's so many, I know. Well, now I have more questions, Gregory and Gail. So based on that, and I love that Rumi quote, it really helped me kind of open my understanding when I first heard it. I'd love to understand more about the micro and the macro of these healing pendants. So the micro being like for the individual, what does it do? And then in the ocean, it's essentially you're harnessing all of the healing into kind of one drop of the sacred geometry and gemstones that are then in a wearable pendant. I know I'm condensing that down to very like Sesame Street style understanding here, but will you explain a little bit about what can be gained from the sacred geometry pendants, a little bit more about how they work for the individual?
Yeah. So, the most important thing, and so much of our tools are about this, and it's about connection. How do we connect with those higher aspects of who we are?
Yeah.
And, because we're not just wandering around in these beautiful places in nature most of our lives, actually, the way we live, we are, but most people aren't. There's a lot that distracts us. We give ourselves certain labels and we start trying to fit ourselves into certain boxes, and those limitations keep us from being fully human, from being who we really are. And so, the pendants, their purpose is to establish a divine connection, because when we're connected, we have access to all that. Um, just the other day, I was doing a meditation with a friend, and I got this piece of information that kind of startled me. And it was that um, we have become addicted to certain frequencies. Like,
Interesting.
for instance, the frequencies that are in our phones and our computers. And, we have so many of us that get sucked into, hours of playing games and social media and all this stuff. And so it's easy for our brains to think, oh, that's because it's so interesting. And we're looking for all this interesting stuff to do. And what I was hearing, and you can check it out with your resources too, Joy, is that it's actually like being addicted.
Yeah.
So, whether it's the wiring in the walls that's going off at certain cycles per second over and over again that we get entrained into, or 5G that's bombarding us with certain elements of the electromagnetic spectrum, it not only gives us more than what we need, a huge, amount on our plate, but it actually obstructs us from being able to relate to the magnificent array of what's out there. There's
Yeah.
so much as, all these universal patterns, they have, rhythm and cycle and pattern and all kinds of things so that things can be created over and over again, but everything is always a little bit different, right? And so those differences, those variations are so important. And the only way that we can really access all of that is by staying connected. So, for instance, we have one of the structures that we have that people absolutely love is called the 5G solution. And what it really does is, people, when 5G, after, all these different things were coming through to elevate our capability to connect with each other on the internet and with our
Yeah.
phones and all that, they give us great capability to connect on that level. But what they do is they're bombarding us with this pattern, this rhythm that's so entraining that it keeps us from the vast array of what else we need. So people would say, well, what can we do to protect ourselves from it? And I would say it's not about protection. Protection is coming out of fear.
Right.
What this is about is connection. Connection is strengthening who we are. It's strengthening our relationship to our soul, to cosmos, to the God spirit, all of that. And when we are connected, then our access is absolutely phenomenal and unlimited. And
Yeah.
so that's really essentially what these pendants, I strayed away from that for a while,
No, it's
but what these
perfect.
pendants and so many of the tools that we create bring that connection back to us so that we are not um, we're not limited by all of those different aspects that are, just like bombarding us all
Yeah.
the time. And that's what we need. We need to be able to have access to the vastness of what's here for our well being and our creativity and our higher connections of evolving into being more fully human.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that um, it shifts our frequency, then literally the frequencies coming into us shift and the frequencies that come out of us shift. And it's very clear with some people, like a grandmother who told me that what she loved about the pendant was that her grandkids used to run away from her when she visited,
Oh,
and now they crawl all over her
wow.
because they're attracted to that energy. I had prison guards tell me that prisoners treat them better. Teachers say the students act better. Lawyers talk about clients arguing less when they have certain geometries running in the environment because it shifts the frequency, and we don't realize that so many of the things going on in the world are creating an agitation for us that make us uncomfortable. And we look around, and if you're the closest person sitting next to me, I go, must be your fault that
Yeah.
I'm feeling bad. And, we do that with each other, but we
Yeah.
don't realize it's just the whole field is creating something where we feel agitated. And when the vibrations of natural order that we have found come in from these forms, like antenna systems, then our frequencies start shifting. We feel better because it feels more natural. It feels like it does when you're sitting under a tree next to a stream and the birds are singing and the wind is blowing, and you have that sense of connection because that's the natural order of everything. And when we slip into that natural order, it feels so good. And we can now do that with the help of a pendant, a tool that will shift the frequency coming into our body and shifts the frequency coming out of our body, so that then the world starts dancing in a different way to accommodate what we are putting out.
I really want to unpack this a little more because that's back to mirroring the vibrational harmonics, the resonant harmonics that you were talking about earlier, right? And it sounds like
Mhm.
these pendants, because of the matching sacred geometry that is naturally around us, are acting almost as tuning forks in a very
Mhm.
basic sense. Um,
Mhm.
I've again, so many questions. I do want to highlight though. So you gave some great examples of how someone wearing this is adding a more of maybe a balancing vibration to the space that they're in, and it's affecting the other people's moods or behavior in that space. Where in here is the responsibility for like the individual's emotional work, for example? Because with the prison guard, let's say, yes, there's a harmonics happening that they're noticing a direct result in the way people are engaging with them. But is it, I mean, for me, I'm like, well, I know there's no magic pills here. So is it where then that guard is still responsible for kind of doing the emotional tuning on where they're placing their awareness? Are they placing it in the more loving part of the spectrum? Are they treating other people poorly? Because it's not going to override that. Am I understanding this right?
Mm-hmm. So that's a really good way of looking at it too, because that's one of the things, being in the human body, in this life, we have responsibility, right? And we're really here to learn, not just be at the mercy of all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And that actually is an important piece of it, because oftentimes when we're feeling very disconnected, we could be, reacting where
Yes.
we're more at the mercy of things rather than being empowered to actually interact with something where we're utilizing our capabilities, our wisdom, our experience, our knowledge, our compassion and
Yeah.
understanding. So Something that I remember people talking to me about the pendant. There was this one psychologist that she said, what I love about this pendant is that it allows me to be able to step back for a moment, take a breath, and be able to come back into the moment in a way where I'm engaging more of myself. So that's really the beauty of it, to engage more of ourselves rather than the limitation of it. And when we're not so in a place of feeling as if we have to battle what's going on around us, then we can be creative. We can draw on our history, our wisdom, our relationships, whatever, and bring them into the moment in a much more positive way. And then evolution can actually take place in a more appropriate way rather than reacting. It's like something I loved the work and still love the work of Buckminster Fuller. He inspired me, and he was the amazing genius who created the geodesic dome and talked about synergy and lots about the tetrahedron, which is a three-dimensional triangle, and how energy works with that. And he made a distinction between, we're in a time where we are focused more on weaponry.
Yeah.
And what we really need is livingry. And so in order to really embody livingry, then we need to be able to step back and not feel at the mercy of other things, not feel threatened, instead connected. And in those connections, drawing in what we're capable of drawing in each and every moment.
I love that. And then it sounds like it's, in the way you're explaining it, it's giving a little bit of, I don't know, space is the best word I have for it, even though I know that's not quite right, so that the individual can then more intentionally, the way I say it in my work is set the frequency of their crown chakra to what they're wanting to experience. And it sounds like the pendant in a way can help to then magnify that out into the world. And that's how it's affecting either the classroom or on a more macro scale. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, to a certain extent. It's like when we started talking earlier on, and when we
It can be on the screen.
Okay, where am I?
There it is.
When we started talking earlier on about awareness and about consciousness, and we talked about us being like an iceberg where the 90% of us is unseen, unused, and we have so much information in universe that we can garner, but we have to take our awareness from just this physical dimension, take it to this bigger part of ourselves. And that can happen simultaneous to all the things that we're doing right now, that we're talking back and forth, we're interacting with this world, but we can be coming from a little bit higher, broader, more loving, more inclusive perspective. And then we see the bigger picture and then a bigger relational picture and so on.
Yeah.
And then we see ourselves in relationship to all of that, where we go, oh, I don't have to take myself so personally, because this is just a character in the play.
Yeah.
Look what Joy is doing. Look how she's doing things. And look how her friends and my friends and everyone. And so it's just allowing our awareness to be coming from a larger, more inclusive place. And the tools over time, when you start working with these shifts in vibrations, maybe your mind is in an old habit of worrying about stuff. What that guy did to me 25 years ago, and I'm not going to forget it. And maybe it's time to forget it. And maybe it's time to let the stuff that doesn't serve you go. And you can see that more easily from a place that's a little more loving, a little bigger, where you're watching yourself just the way you would a small child. We give directions to children so easily,
Yeah,
but we don't take those directions very easily ourselves. If a
it's
friend
very
comes
true.
up to you and says, you do this, and you go, not me, you can't tell me that.
Yeah.
But, you know, we have to open ourselves up to a space where we can see that, where we can recognize that aspect and allow change to happen.
Yeah.
Allow the frequencies to slowly, if we keep showing up and it feels good, pretty soon we're going to start focusing on what feels good and let go of what doesn't feel good.
So then is this how sacred geometry starts to help us transform our what we're experiencing in this life? Because obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but we have this whole iceberg happening, but we also are responsible currently for living in this 3D reality simultaneously, right? So these two things are happening. And I know a lot of people are focused on results in the world and we all want to live a wonderful life. What you were just talking about with having more of that frequency of those higher levels of self, am I understanding that piece right, that this is how that this technology, the sacred geometry, helps transform our lives?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. And what's really important, there's a lot of people when we talk about, you know, uh, how to create, how to create your life. We're really more able to create on the higher realms first through our clarity, through our feelings, when
Yeah.
we have really, passion and positive emotion around something that's fueling what it is that we're putting out to the universe. We're putting it out vibrationally. And think about it in terms of what we've been talking about. We're putting out something vibrationally, and the more coherent it is, the more we're fueling it with positive intention and, our love and passion and all that stuff, it's helping it actually come together, crystallize into something that wants to come into the physical. That's the way that it all works. So, it's a beautiful way to think about how it impacts our lives. It helps us move out of that sphere of stress. I mean, look, we all go through stress. Things that go on in our lives and what we see going on outside of our lives
Yeah.
sometimes around us, it can create, difficulty. Now, if we stay focused on that, then that's where the energy is going to go.
Yeah.
That's quantum physics tells us, there's all this potential in the universe. Which way are those molecules going to get directed? It really is a matter of what we're focused on. And here's a real interesting experience just yesterday. We had a friend that came to visit us, and she's been going through some rough times from a major loss in her life, and had just gone through a healing session that just jarred her. And, instead of getting into her space, what we did was we accepted her with where she was in that moment, and then kind of like brought her into another energy through through the who we are, the work that we do, the way that our home feels.
Yeah.
And then we gave her this form that's called
Divine
the
integrator.
divine integrator, and it really helps. She needed integration with what had been brought up in that session, and she sat with it and held it and meditated with it and held it in different places on her body. And her energy shifted radically.
Wow.
And she looked different. She breathed differently. She acted differently. She was able to move from that space into a whole new space. And it was really profound to see this. And these aren't isolated situations.
Yeah.
We see this kind of thing all the time because, that energy that sometimes we get sucked into, it's potent. And this is a way to move out of that, and not in a way that denies the value of what it was, but instead helping us to integrate so that we can take responsibility for whatever it is that we've come here to learn, and then kind of take that moment, that breath, and redirect it
Yeah.
into where we can really bring benefit.
It's really powerful. And I feel like it's in those spaces, those breaths, that I personally experience the most what I would identify as divine inspiration of when people are saying, what's my next step? Or what do I, it's, well, the answers are there. It's just, can you create that space to receive them? Right.
Good point.
Very
It's
good.
about the reception. And that's one of the things with us moving into more of these feminine aspects that we're doing right now, just universally, and what
Yeah.
we've all been directed into with our
Mhm.
work is it's the reception part. We're away now from that place. We're moving out of power over.
Thank
We
God.
are, done with it, but it's still there, but we're
Yes.
really done with it. It's just still playing its little game. And what is replacing it is allowing, compassion, allowing, being able to embrace a situation in a more conscious, compassionate, and loving way. And so, we need these aspects and tools that
Yeah.
are embodying more of that feminine spirit of allowing.
I feel like it's
No more pushing.
one of the many reasons why your work is so powerful. It's who doesn't in their own lives, in their family, in their workplace, who doesn't need more of that cooperation that the divine feminine offers, the receptivity, the connection, which is the underpinning of all this work.
Exactly. Beautifully
Mhm.
said.
And it really is the doorway into higher consciousness.
Yeah.
As explained in the book, I mean, just
Yes.
simply with numbers, understanding 1 and 2, and how 2 is this duality. And duality also offers us the opportunity for relationship, for energy to flow
Yeah.
between the separate components. And it's just such a beautiful universe, really, that we live in. And it's our opportunity to be part of it, to be dancing with it, rather than trying to fight it, trying to overcome it, trying to do all the things that, humankind does with nature. It's like we want to conquer it rather than work with it. And that's, I think, the real difference we're wanting to share in this book.
And it's an incredible work. Like I said, you share in the beginning of the book the story of how you meet, and through kind of through Buckminster. And it's a beautiful story for anyone who I hope everyone will read the book. But I see you as artists, and it's you're bringing all of these sacred tools and techniques through as artists in the world, which is really incredible. You do a lovely job in the book. Like I was saying, there's plenty of pictures, and you show pictures of these tools and technologies. And you also have beautiful artwork and illustrations and photos on your website. Will you tell everyone? I'll link it in the show notes, of course, but will you tell everyone where to find you and where to find the book?
Yeah. Our website is iconnecttoall.com. So it's the letter I, the word connect, the number 2, and the word all, ALL.com. And here's an offer for you. If you put after that /chapter, then we're offering a free chapter of our book, the first chapter on what is consciousness. So we'd love to have you come there. And then on our website, under the tab shop, you can explore the different tools that we've been creating over the years. There's lots of videos, YouTube videos, all kinds of information that we have. And um, if you want a digital download of the book, you can get that at Barnes & Noble or Amazon. Our books are all there as well. But if you buy the book from us, you can get a signed copy of the
Ooh,
paperback book.
that's very cool. You
Yeah.
also have a free gift meditation, which I'm going to link in the show notes, with universal patterns of sacred geometry, attunements, how to connect with higher guidance, which is a beautiful offer. I'll link it in there. I highly recommend everyone
Thank you.
checking that
Thank you.
out.
We love doing guided meditations. they're basically short meditations, and we show
Hmm.
how the geometries are really mesmerizing, engaging, relaxing, and allowing you to go into another space. So creating that beautiful field that
Yeah.
supports you in your you-ness.
And it's such a powerful and simple way to illustrate how this work, even though it's so profound and there's a lot to it, it's so accessible to everyone. Everyone can listen to
Hmm.
a guided meditation, right?
Mm, thank you. Thank you.
Well, shifting gears, I could talk to you guys all day because obviously, as you probably have already discerned, I have a million questions for you, especially after reading the book. It's like, okay, my little brain is working. I feel like you could see cartoon steam coming out of my head. We here, when we interview guests, do something called the Spirit Speed Round. It doesn't have to be speedy, but it's 4 fun and interesting questions. I would love to hear your perspectives and answers. Are you okay to dive into that?
You bet.
Exciting. The first question is, I think you might both have a different answer on this, so I'm excited to hear it. Will you share one thing that really shocked you or was unexpected about working with sacred geometry?
Ah, well, I'll tell you the first time that when I met Gregory and he was carrying around these structures, these geometric structures that he had created. So this is, close to 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And he didn't really totally know what he was carrying yet either. And so I just happened to put my hands over like some of the points and went, wow, I can feel this. I could feel the energy coming off of these points, off of these different structures. And so that really got my attention.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I wanted to know is, well, wait, what are we going to do with this? How can we actually do something wonderful and positive with it? Then we started to find out how they were awesome for meditation and bringing in higher guidance and intuition and all that stuff. And that was that was profound because I had no idea that that's what I
Yeah.
was getting into.
I think that's most
And
people. That's
it
great.
was shocking to me when I came from a background of science and math, and that's what I studied in college. And then when I spent 10 years working with um, kind of ashram, spiritual pursuit. And then when I put these geometries together, when I started seeing them and sharing them with people, I was really surprised when people would say, yeah, I can feel energy. And I say, really? How about this one? And how about this one? Do you
Yeah.
really? I mean, because it was amazing to me that people were feeling energy and that it's just a geometry, it's a form. And we don't think about these forms sending out fields of energy. Now I
Yeah.
certainly do, but it took me a long time to open up to that.
It's, I think we don't really realize, not everyone realizes, you obviously do, this connection between science and spiritual. And we think of them as these two entirely separate spheres. And they're so, for me, that's my hope for the future, is that there's going to continue to be visibly more connected or experientially more connected
Mm-hmm.
for all of us.
Along with art,
Yes.
spirit, and science.
Yeah.
When we really bring all that together, whew,
I'm
it's
pretty
going to be
excited.
a fabulous emergence.
I hope I'm still here.
And
I hope so
and
too.
I loved doing art, and yet I would say, why should I paint a flower when a flower already exists and it biodegrades and it works with bees and it smells
Yeah.
good, as well as, nature has it all worked out. So what can I create that would be unique for a human being that would add something to the whole system, add energy to the play? And that's what led me toward this understanding of sacred geometry. This was
Yeah.
something I could do as an artist that would have benefits and be unique rather than trying to just duplicate what is already being done so well by nature. Build a better
Yeah.
waterfall, build a better tree, build a better flower. No, it's already pretty good.
Yeah, more structural, experiential art is kind of your. I see, Gregory. I see you more as a sculptor or a
Yeah.
structural artist.
Mhm.
Hmm.
This is a bit of a different question. If you got to spend a day in the spirit world on the other side, or I guess in those higher levels of consciousness, you got the full tour, you got to spend time with everyone you've ever known who's crossed over. It's almost time for you to return to your life, and your guides tell you you have 1 hour left and you can spend it with anyone who's in non-physical that you choose. Who do you choose and why?
Mm. Well, that's an interesting one. You know, um, I really loved uh, the experience with Buckminster Fuller
Yeah,
after he passed, and asked him to come to me and teach me. And so I would probably go to him first.
I had a feeling
But
that's what you're going to say.
before I would leave, you know, I have to tell you, just what's going through my consciousness right now is Buddha,
Mm,
is just to sit in quiet and meditation with Buddha. Now, I also love um, just, you know, the idea of not the being Buddha, but the energy
yeah, the
Buddha,
consciousness, right?
the consciousness Buddha.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a beautiful answer.
I would love to build something with Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh,
Oh,
that's a good
yeah.
one
You
too.
know,
Yeah.
he's, and we saw an exhibit where they had a lot of his work, and it was really wonderful. And yet there was a quotation of his that struck me really deeply inside, and it was that he felt that God was displeased with him because his work didn't get out far enough. People didn't understand what it was he was trying to share. So he took that personally
Wow.
as a mistake on his part. And so I think that's so important to realize for each of us, that we do everything we can to share what we know and our love and our abilities, but not to feel personally slighted or feel that we've done it wrong or we've displeased God because it hasn't taken the form that we feel it should.
Mm,
Yeah.
Because look at how many people have been inspired by
mm.
Leonardo da Vinci.
I think
And
all of
yet
us
in
to some
Yeah.
degree.
in
Yeah.
his lifetime, I mean, he struggled with his humanness and the
Yes.
failings
Yeah.
of being a human being. And so that's an important lesson for each of us to
Mm.
take to heart.
Yeah.
Wow. Those are really profound answers. Thank you, guys. Even though this is a total pivot, even though we have spiritual gifts or we work in this field, we have very human lives. What is one quirky thing about you that people might be surprised to learn?
Hmm. Quirky thing. Well, you know, I love, now that it's summertime, I love getting up in the morning in my nightgown. We don't have people around us. We live out in, you know, the country.
Yes, there's beautiful
And
photos
going
of your home in the book too, by the way, of your space.
and going into the garden and picking picking vegetables, picking sugar snaps and eating them right off the vine, and, you know, looking at all the beautiful growth that's happening and picking it and thinking of, now what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
I I just, something about summer that's so special. I just really love doing that.
I love that.
So I like to play with everything outside and watch the animals. And it's like the very thrush. I love to watch all the different birds and animals. We have everything from I catch rattlesnakes
Wow.
and move them away from the land. I've caught probably 40 or 50 in the time we've lived
Nice.
here.
Wow.
So I catch things like that, and I watch mountain lions and bear and bobcats and a lot of elk and deer and spiders. I like to I'll take care of snakes if they get caught in the fence, or take care of animals if if worms get caught on the sidewalk after a rain. I always go around and pick them all up and put them someplace where they'll be okay.
That's beautiful. I love that answer. See, great expressions of humanness, right? Will you each leave us with a pearl of wisdom? What's one piece of advice that you wish you had earlier in your understanding of sacred geometry?
Hmm. Oh, I think the most important thing is go from your head to your heart. Take it in here.
Yeah,
It's really fun to intellectualize it and to try to figure it out and all that stuff, and that's a part of it. However, take it in here and experience the essence of what it offers to you.
that's beautiful.
I think one of the things I am constantly learning is what's happening now is perfectly perfect, and that timing is not something that can be figured out in the head, but it's something like part of the questioning that we had a little bit ago. It came down to allowing.
Yeah,
So we have to allow the universe to do what it does with us in the space of the perfect timing for everything, and not try to push the space, but to be happy with where we are right now, each moment. So if we can be totally present each moment, it'll be perfect.
that is a really important piece of wisdom. Well, I so appreciate you both being here again. The book is Sacred Geometry, the Universal Language of Divine Alignment. Of course, everything will be linked in the show notes. I just, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you for the work that you somehow condensed into that book, and the teaching that you continue to offer, and all of the tools and beautiful representations of those tools that you are pushing out into the world. So thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing your time with me and for shining your light.
Oh, thank
thank
you,
you,
Joy. What a
Joy.
pleasure, and such beautiful questions. Thank you
Ah,
so
Thanks.
much.
you're such a light.
Oh,
It's
you're
really
very sweet. Thank you.
nice to be in your presence.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you as well.
Mm.
What an incredible time I had in this conversation. I hope you guys could feel my excitement. And a lot of times I was just chomping at the bit to ask a follow up question. But even as I was thinking the follow up question, they would often answer it. And it's funny because you can hear in the interview them saying, like, oh, I went off on a bit of a tangent there. And I'm laughing inside saying, yeah, because you were answering the question I was thinking. So I love when things just get into that flow and feel so tuned in, tapped in, serendipitous, which is such a part of their work and so profound. What you guys didn't get to hear is after we ended the interview, we chatted for a few minutes waiting for the digital files to upload. And I sort of invited myself to their place in Colorado because, like they share in the book, and like we briefly touched on, they have built these structures of sacred geometry, which are represented in some of the pendants and tools that they have, which again, be sure to check out their website. Let me tell you what it is. It's going to be linked in the show notes. It is I Connect to All, the number two. I'll link it in the show notes, but I'm so excited to continue to explore and investigate this work myself. If you are at all interested in sacred geometry, I highly recommend checking out their website and definitely the book. I read it and I plan to read it again. I probably will use it indefinitely as a resource and as a touch point. You guys know that I don't just bring everyone into share and to talk to you. And Gail and Gregory literally have over 4 decades individually in this work. So we're getting more than 80 years of knowledge between the two of them. And we only scratch the surface today of what is expressed in the book. So that's my that's my review, to check it out. And just the power that sacred geometry can bring. It's all around us in plain sight. Most of us have heard of it or seen it, even if we don't realize that we have, like we were talking about. But they take it to this deep yet simple understanding of how it can profoundly affect each of us and how we can use it to transform our lives. So I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. I hope that you learned a little something and maybe got a little bit curious. All it did for me, besides making me so excited, was make me more and more curious to learn more and more and to start integrating their work more and more into my practice. So I hope that it has done something of the same for you. I so appreciate Gail and Gregory for being here, shining their light. They are truly luminaries of our time. And for each of you for being here with me inside Spirit Speakeasy. Big hugs. Bye for now. I will talk to you soon.